Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood law gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Well, I am very glad to be here for another recording with my colleagues over here on That's Comical, Cammy and Andy. Guys, it is so great to be doing another one of these videos with you again.
Always exciting with you guys.
Yep, happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
And I'm really excited for tonight's video because not only are we going back into the celebration of the 85th anniversary of Batman, but we're doing a video that we haven't done in such a long time. And when it comes to this trio, who wore it best is definitely one where I think we get to our peak in terms of not just our knowledge when it comes to comparing stories found in the page of the comics and translations into movies and television shows, but I think it's because of the fact that we just get so deep into things that we love in entertainment that our conversations just go in so many great directions. I took the liberty of rewatching our Red Sun discussion and our Injustice discussion, and I just like look at this stuff and I'm like, God, aren't these people swell? What a great time we have. So
It's funny because I was thinking of those two, and I was like, oh, you guys know I'm always about the shirts, and I was like, this is the one time I really need a shirt with a Zephyr on it.
So, of course, we're also diving into a Batman story that is part of the Elseworlds titles. Cammy, one of your favorite discussions in regards to DC, and apparently the very first one that was ever done, and I believe it was in 1989. And that was Brian Augustine's Batman Gotham by Gaslight. And I'm actually going to be holding up the movie, which was done in the mid 2010s, and for very good reason. So I was excited about this episode because the film Batman Gotham by Gaslight happens to be, still to this day, my favorite animated film in the DC animation library. It was Batman Under the Red Hood for such a long time, and then this comes out, and I'm just like, oh man, this looks pretty darn awesome. And not just that, this also features the voice of my second favorite actor to play the role of Batman. Kevin Conroy is the icon. He's the number one. But even in Batman Under the Red Hood, when they announced that Bruce Greenwood was going to be returning to voice Batman, I was so excited because Bruce Greenwood is one of my favorite character actors. If you can't put the name to the face, everyone in the general audience and even the people in the room, I'll just let you know, he's the president in National Treasure 2. So now you can put the voice to the face. There you go. He also played John F. Kennedy in a great movie with Kevin Costner called 13 Days. I highly recommend that movie if you want to see an interesting movie about the Bay of Pigs. That was a fantastic, fantastic movie, and it doesn't get enough credit.
Oh, I mean, I didn't have anything there on following up on movies that are not Gotham by Gaslight. I mean, I can comment though, however, on I did think I agree with you and made a little face there that Kevin Conroy is the best Batman voice. We've talked about that on the show, but I do think the cast did a really good job in the film version. It's always difficult for me to know exactly kind of where to start with these discussions because there is a default, I mean, the book came first, right? To kind of talk a little bit about my feelings there first. But, for everybody's knowledge, even though this is a very popular one and a highly thought of book, this was my first time getting to read it. So this was a really exciting opportunity for me. So I read the book and watched the adaptation in a very short time frame back to back in preparation for this. So it's a cool position to be in. But I will tell you, without the baggage of like years and years and years of history with the original, I thought the cast did a really great job in the animated version broadly, and we can get to that more later.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, all three people in this room, this was the first time that we all read this book. Now, I only went and saw the movie first because that was my first exposure to it. So, of course, I know when it comes to these projects, there's almost always a comic book involved. And this was actually the first time I read it because of the fact that we were going to be discussing it. And I gotta say, I really did enjoy the book for what it was. I thought that it was a very good story. I actually was surprised by how quick of a read it was. But then as I'm reading this book, I'm just like saying to myself, my God, the people who put the film together, they really did something truly special, because to take the story that you had in the book and turn it into what you get in the film, that is talent, man. I mean, like, you've got to not just know how to write a great story, because you've got to really also appreciate and love your Batman lore, because Batman Gotham by Gaslight in the book compared to the film, we're literally comparing night and day, apples to oranges. It is insane how different these two stories are.
No, I mean, yeah, I knew we were gonna get to it, and I knew when I was gonna be able to interject. But I think for me, the biggest thing is the depiction of Jack the Ripper, because of the horror element. Of course, you guys know, in addition to being the Scream Queen that I am, I'm very much involved in reading true crime. That's probably where I started from a very young age. My mom had a coffee table book that was forbidden, which I always thought was very humorous. You know, you're going to put this very graphic book on the coffee table and tell me I can't look at it. That's only going to make me want to look at it. It was called Blood, Letters, and Badman, and it was basically crime scene photos. And you know, my curiosity became the best of me, and that kind of led me down the dark path that is what I am now. So serial killers obviously have been a part of my repertoire for a long time, but I think that the movie depicted Jack the Ripper way better than what the graphic novel did for me. There's still, you know, some gray area that I think didn't get touched, but you also have to think of the time that this was created. 1989, we were in a very different society, and I think we've come to glamorize serial killers nowadays. You know, we put them on this pedestal and make them out to be these handsome hunks, and you know, all these women flock to prisons to want to marry these inmates, you know, that have murdered tons of women, and I've just never understood that
Yeah, I'm
mindset.
with you there.
But Jack the Ripper Jack the Ripper is just one of those serial killers that really just weighs heavy on a lot of people, because we really don't know a lot about him. We've made a lot of assumptions. There is a lot of clues that we've kind of pieced together over the years. So it's really interesting when someone wants to visualize, from a creative standpoint, how they envision Jack the Ripper in a certain time frame. And where I love the Elseworlds is where we can kind of time travel a little bit, and you get some of this with this series, you know. So it kind of touches on a lot of areas that I love, you know, serial killers, time travel, Batman, and you also get Commissioner Gordon in a different light, and I love when we do that with Commissioner Gordon. Of course, he was Detective Gordon, and in this one, I will always call him the Commissioner, because that's what he is to me. But well, he does change, I guess, in the comic book at the
In the
second
movie,
half.
he's the
So
commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I was okay. I was sort of right. But you know, it's dark in all the right areas. It's got all the right grit, but to me, the graphic novel really read more like a romance novel. Maybe I'm off base with that a little bit, but that's the vibes that I got from it. You know, to me, there was just that underlying story of Batman and Julie, and you know, that whole thing, and which was great, but that's not what I dive into my comic books for. If I want romance, I know where to go.
Yeah, I
So
think the reason why Jack the Ripper, I mean, again, how can you not want to read the story of the world's greatest mystery attempted to be solved by the world's greatest detective? I mean, that is the greatest combination that you can think of. And getting the opportunity to use the Elseworld title and play around with what we've seen, because like the last time we got together and did a Must Be Read, we talked about Superman Red Sun, and that's also an Elseworlds title. I mean, I'm really glad to say that one of my favorite DC comics in the last couple of years, literally the last 2 or 3 years, was Dark Knights of Steel, where we see the world of DC in a Game of Thrones-like scenario. So you could play with so many different things, which is what I love. But Jack the Ripper is a name that everybody knows, and it is still incredible to see how he has stayed within popular culture. And I think it's just because of the fact that the mystery had never been solved. I think that's really what it is. And there have been other very well done adaptations featuring Jack the Ripper. I mean, I know that the most praised is From Hell by Alan Moore. That's like one of the most well known Jack the Ripper graphic novels ever made. I thought that the book was a very interesting depiction. I mean, I loved the whole concept of the fact that Bruce Wayne is originally found to be in England learning about Jack the Ripper and what's been going on across the pond. And then when he comes back to Gotham, he sees, oh my God, the killer's here. Because that's another big mystery about Jack the Ripper. Did he actually get out of England and did he actually get to the United States? We're not exactly sure. But I will just say that the one thing that the movie did beautifully that the book really, and I'm not saying that the book didn't do it, but it definitely wasn't the book's primary focus. Just bringing other characters from Batman's lore into the story and giving them little roles to play. I gotta be honest with you, my favorite thing about the film is the three Robins. I just love the fact that they gave us the opportunity to see Dick, Jason, and Tim. I just thought that was such a cute little touch, and I love that it sort of was like, you know, Charles Dickinson's Oliver. They knew what to do and they knew how to hold their own. But no, it was just like the little things that they did to add the rest of Batman's lore into the story and how Jack the Ripper affects them. We'll get into that a little bit later, but that I think is one of the few reasons that I will usually favor the film over the book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's interesting. So first off, I also thought that my favorite little addition there was the three Robins. That was very cute. You know, in looking up a little bit about this, I realized this is the first book that DC retroactively branded as an Elseworlds title, right? Which makes sense. I mean, it has all of that vibe to it. But the book was very much written to be a fairly simple Batman story in a different setting. And the movie was very much made, in my mind, to be a fan servicey Elseworlds like story. And so you get a whole lot more, oh, here, check out this version of this character, here, check out this version of this character. It's not, I say fan service in like really not a pejorative way, to be clear, because I know I can come across that way. It's more like, since we have this history of what an Elseworlds title does now, the film kind of had this expectation of, let's have the fun of exploring what different versions of characters would be, since like we're here, like why not? So in a way, the film, and again, I don't want this to be read as pejorative either, the film is actually more complex than the comic, but it's because it has this deep history to it, albeit one starting in '89, but it's got this deep history to it of what Elseworld stories are, which the original graphic novel simply didn't. And so I think that works to its advantage and against it. I think it makes it a little less unique. I think part of the reason why the graphic novel is beloved despite its simplicity largely would lie in the uniqueness of the telling at the time, which is not to disparage it. I really enjoyed it. And to give a preview as to where my head is at, I'm a little confused as to how to answer our who wore it best question. So I'm happy to have the discussion because it'll kind of help solidify it in my mind. But I've got very good things to say about both works. And one thing I want to say before I shut myself up, Cami, you said something that made me want to clarify. My time-tested question that I already previewed to Steve. What version of it did you read? Because I told this to Steve earlier. I also read the follow-up Master of the Future, because the edition that I read included both Gotham by Gaslight and Master of the Future. So I think you implied that you read both. 2. So I just wanted to know if you
I
had.
did.
Okay, okay. So Steve hasn't. So Steve, you still haven't read Master of the Future, right? That's the case?
No, as a matter of fact, I had no idea that that book even existed, because I was actually telling Cammie a few weeks ago that there's a whole bunch of Elseworld titles coming out this year. As a matter of fact, at some point in time this year, they're making a facsimile edition of the original graphic novel. So that's pretty cool. But now they're doing a story called The Kryptonian Age. Gotham by Gaslight, The Kryptonian Age. I'm not going to check it out because I don't know who the writer is. I don't know who the artist is. And so I don't know. I mean, Cammie, if you dive into it and you tell me it's good, I'll eat some crow and I'll definitely check it out. But it's not really grabbing my attention. And also, from what I heard that Andy told me, the official sequel was really nothing special either.
Yeah, I will tell you, like, Cammie, between us, since Steve hasn't read it, and also between us and the viewers, if people have read it, for the record, I hated Master of the Future. I thought it was terrible.
So he read it, so you don't have
to. just it's totally fine if you disagree with me, but at a high level, I just want to note I hated Master of the Future. Reading it was a chore. I'm glad we're only talking about Gotham by Gaslight. And the most frustrating parts of the film version for me were the parts that made cheeky little nods to Master of the Future, because I was like, I really want to just not think about this shit. Anyway, sorry to anyone who feels very differently, because I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that's not exactly the mainstream take on it. But just so everybody knows where I'm coming from. But Gotham by Gaslight was great, and I'm excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, because when you mentioned that, that's when I got a little bit scared. I'm like, oh no, what parts of the film are taken from this other book?
It's really surface level, and I won't like really spoil anything, but I'll just say things that you probably just conceived of as like, oh, this was created from whole cloth as a set piece or an idea for the movie. Some of it draws upon Master of the Future. The fact that there is a fair for some fucking reason. The fact that there is a fair,
makes perfect sense.
That's Jack the Ripper. The fair is the Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
Ripper nod, and I think they played on that because of the sequel. But yeah, Jack the Ripper, they say that, and again, you know, it's really hard to kind of put the puzzle pieces together, because a lot of the things, a lot of the murders of women of that time were blamed on him, but they say that it started at the fair, and a lot of it was centralized as him making his mark at the World Fair. So
sure.
I think that's why there was so much energy given to it.
Sure. But it's a big set piece of Master of the Future, and a driving. It's different how it is used, obviously, but there's the driving World's Fair piece to it, and also the set piece of the fight in the Zeppelin, right? You know, like that's Master of the Future too. So I'm more so, having read it first and then going to watch it, not that there was anything wrong with those scenes, but just I really hated Master of the Future so much that when those aspects were raised, I was like, ugh, what are we doing here?
Yeah, but
in a way though, I think it despite, you know, the nod to the fair and all of that scene that you're referencing, I just thought it was very out of place too. It was just unnecessary, and I was just like, is this done yet? You know, and I know where it came from, but I wasn't a fan of it. I think it was an extra piece that could have been left out and we wouldn't have missed it. But you know, you've got to give a nod to every fan out there. And so for those that did like that sequel, you know, there it is for you.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you guys. I mean, like, I had no issue with the whole concept of the World's Fair, because we're talking about the period of time in the Industrial Revolution. So World's Fairs were things that were pretty prominent. But there is a point in time where I was rewatching this scene and I'm just like looking at it. And then the whole thing that goes on with Sister Leslie, I'm just like, this scene's going on a little too long. I don't understand why. Like, I'm starting to find this to be quite weird and boring. So, and now I think I understand why. So thank you for that, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think you know, and I say that and I focus on those things, the allusions to that comic, mostly just to set that's what I read, you know, and that's my background with it, right? And to underscore, I really do like Gotham by Gaslight. I feel entirely different about Gotham by Gaslight than I do Master of the Future. Um, but it does talk about like how in the film version we do get those nods to other characters, like I'm talking about. So putting aside the allusions to Master of the Future, there was a lot I liked. I know that I already mentioned that I do think that the Robins was kind of the best. I really liked their characterization, and I also just thought that their inclusion was kind of fun, especially the way Alfred kind of pulled them in. I just pretty much all of those scenes, my fan was serviced. I just like there was a smile on my face with everything that was done with them. It just worked, right? So as someone who is a fan of Batman, that was a really delightful part of the movie. I would say then that the, you know, inclusion and exploration of characters was hit or miss. I thought it was really fun adding Catwoman. I thought it was really fun adding Hugo Strange. And I sure hope that whatever happens in this, you know, spiritual sequel, third Gotham by Gaslight story that's coming out later this year won't involve Poison Ivy, because that was a very unnecessary inclusion in the movie. And we will not be able to we will not be able to do any meaningful retellings of that story if she plays a prominent role in an upcoming comic.
You see, I'm going to disagree with you on that, because I
You
feel
like that?
well, I felt that it was absolutely great because it played on Jack the Ripper's character, because that's really what Jack the Ripper was all about. I mean, was it upsetting to see Cammie's favorite villainess become her Jack's first victim in the movie? I'm not so sure. But I mean, it's like, if you're going to put some familiar characters into I mean, let me be perfectly honest with me, Andy. Would it have been more satisfying to you if it was Harley?
I mean, the answer is no, though that's an interesting question. It's more one of those, it's like I am of two minds of it. It goes to speak to my underlying point. I really do like both. I really genuinely did enjoy it with both. I feel a little conflicted about the choice to kill Poison Ivy, just because on the one hand, the film is short and has so much going on already. It's not like there's a place for her more broadly. It's not like we're really missing out, and we should be comfortable to kill our darlings. But it's also like, it just felt like burning a possibility in the first 5 minutes. I don't know. So it as a fan, it kind of hits me like, oh, that was it. Okay. You know.
No, I think it's also about, like, you know, when you take a look at a time frame like the late 1800s, early 1900s, who are the characters in all of Batman that actually will fit into this timepiece? Because, oh goodness, the fact that there's no Joker in this film is a breath of fresh air to me. Because Joker just, I'm sorry, I don't think he belongs in that story. I don't.
He's in the comic.
He's in the comic.
Yeah.
I don't even remember him being in the comic.
He's referenced. It's a throwaway.
He's the master.
Right. That's right. Yeah. I guess that was just one of those few things that I brushed off because it was just not a visual for me. I don't know.
And to me, that really was a very nice nod to the Joker, without oversaturating us with it, because so often that's what all you get with Batman is just, you know, that feud. And I'm gonna also have to disagree with you, Andy. I think the placement of Poison Ivy and her demise was perfection, because I have seen Poison Ivy placed in this time period many times over the course of being introduced to many Batman stories, both animated features as well as on paper. It is great to see her portrayed as a harlot of the night, because that it's very fitting for her character. Many times I've seen Poison Ivy portrayed in this manner, where she is kind of that lady of the night, so to speak. You would find her in the red light district, but we don't really dive into that wholeheartedly, because of way it's presented to us. A great example of that is her introduction in Batman the Animated Series. You know, we do get a little bit of seduction of her, although we look at it now as an adult cartoon. It was still geared toward kids because it came on Fox at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after kids got home from school. So we didn't really dive into those DC dark stories, so to speak. So to see her actually portray what I feel is the true nature of Poison Ivy was just great. And then the fact, like Steve said, it really dove into kind of that aspect of giving Jack the Ripper another victim. I thought it was perfectly well played, and we didn't need Poison Ivy. She wasn't part of the story, so why not kill her off? I love her, but sometimes I like to see a bitch die.
I do. I agree with what when I say I agree with you completely. Maybe I won't throw my hat in the ring for the last statement, but I think I agree with your take on that completely. The only thing I add is it's just painful to watch us lose her in the first 5 minutes. That's all.
That is definitely the sinister side of me, my reaction to that. I do like to every now and then just see a woman in a horror setting succumb to her ways, because it's like,
Sure.
you know what, you want to act like a harlot, you want to put yourself in a dark alley in the middle of the night, sometimes it's not going to turn out in your favor, honey. So
sure.
And maybe
sure.
that was purposefully done because of the fact that they want, especially because we've got to be realistic here. I'm going to guess that most people who do watch the animated films are probably not necessarily people that read the source material. I'm sure there are a group of people that did, but there's a lot of people that don't. So if you're someone that has never read the books and you're watching this movie for the first time, the fact that Poison Ivy gets killed in the first 5 minutes, okay, well, now that person is officially sucked into the story and they want to see more.
Yeah, I think it really just opens that segue to, okay, who's this guy? Who's the killer? Like your eyes are automatically on him. His cloak and dagger are out, but we don't see his face. And then now you want to know more. So I think it was very well done. It was a flash in the pan, and we got to see the bum of Miss Ivy, and it was great. It was a good introduction.
And the same thing could be said about Hugo Strange. Did they have to put him into the movie? Not necessarily, but the fact that, one of the few things that we know about the mystery of Jack the Ripper was that the people who were being looked at as who could possibly be this killer, they looked at surgeons. They unfortunately had a lot of anti-Semitism going on because they did peg a lot of Jewish people, because most Jewish people were in those professions at the time. So that's another thing that I specifically remember from the From Hell graphic novel and film starring Johnny Depp. But Hugo Strange, they think it could be him because, he's a medical professional, and then the killer comes after him. And oh man, that's another thing that I didn't really get from the graphic novel. The depiction of Arkham Asylum in the film, that is, I've seen Arkham Asylum in so many different ways. And God willing, we're going to review the Grant Morrison graphic novel later on this year. But the depiction of those old asylums when they just had the crazies walking around in circles, and what they do to Hugo Strange, that's like, let's just say that's why the movie got the R rating. It's one of those little things, but whoa. That's another reason why I love the movie. They made some bold decisions in regards to some of those scenes.
But those are important scenes, when you don't hold back from history, when you don't try to sugarcoat things and make it something that it wasn't. That was what I would feel is a real depiction of what Arkham Asylum would have looked like in the late 1800s. And, up until probably, I even remember in the early 2000s walking past a sanitarium where the crazies were out in night robes with no supervision whatsoever. It was like the weirdest thing I have ever seen in my life. I still have nightmares about this. I got lost in a back road, drove past a sanitarium in Washington State, and Washington State is very much known for having sanitariums. And all of the patients, if you will, were in hospital gowns in the front foyer of the yard, and they were just walking around, and I'm just like, where is the supervision? Where is the like, does anybody have a handle on these people? You know, I honestly thought it was like straight out of a movie or something, you know, that someone had rented it to film some kind of B-list movie. But you know, that was a true depiction, and you had people that were in there, you know, with experiments, and they were experiment projects, you know, and they were being drugged for things that they weren't even experiencing. They were being lobotomized. And, you know, to see that kind of freelance artistry and that ability to let these characters be what they would have been in that time frame is important to the historical perspective of stories like this, which I think is really a draw on the Elseworlds, because you are getting a lot of history mixed with our vision of what could have transpired, and then, you know, that little nod to, okay, this is what I would have wanted to happen. So Elseworlds are super cool.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there aren't that many similarities between the two pieces of media, but there is two specific things. We obviously talked about Jack the Ripper, and the other thing is the fact that at some point in time, Bruce Wayne does get accused and goes to jail. I will definitely say that that's another thing. Seeing the version of Blackgate Prison, which is another famous prison, is also pretty cool. Also, I will say one of the few things I was very happy about that the movie didn't do that the book did do. They didn't go over Batman's origin story. I've seen that in. You see, I know that it is such an iconic moment in Batman lore, and the fact that you have the ability in an Elseworlds title to just play with it and create so many different ways to depict this iconic moment in Bruce Wayne's life. But, oh, God, I'm sorry to say it. It's getting old for me from time to time these days.
I think that's okay. I don't have any problem with saying it's just like not something that you necessarily need to see. I think that that also comes with, I mean, you know, we've read so many Batman stories, and particularly I think this becomes an issue because of how ubiquitous Batman is across various forms of media, that we are constantly reviewing and seeing and talking about media that's a first of a certain type. So like, yeah, you make a Batman movie, you're going to hear a little bit about his origin. Yeah, you make a Batman video game, you're probably going to do his origin. You know, like, but in the world of comics, it's like Elseworlds is one of those things where it's like we're going to see how his origin is different, which is, or lack thereof, in the comic book version, right? But by the time we got to it in the, you know, animated, not the animated universe because it's its own thing as an Elseworlds like standalone title, but you know, they, I don't think they felt the same drive when making that animated movie that they needed to include an origin moment, because who is it really for at that point, right? So I don't think there's anything particularly jaded about what you're saying, Steve. Like I totally understand why you just kind of feel like you'd rather use that extra time to do more. And we did. We gained 5 minutes of Poison Ivy. So we did we did effectively use those 5 minutes that we saved.
Well, again, even though I said that, the scene of Bruce Wayne's parents' murder is actually extremely crucial for the graphic novel because it leans back to the discovery of who Jack the Ripper is. And I will say that that is definitely the saving grace of the book for me, because again, I don't know if I said this in like just tap dancing around it, but I'm just gonna flat out say it right now. I personally feel that the movie is way better than the book, but I do like the book a lot. And I think that the discovery of who Jack the Ripper is probably the best part of the book, just because of the fact that when we find out who it is, and just so everybody knows, this character is not even in the movie. But we discover that Jack the Ripper is actually Bruce Wayne's uncle. And he is not only Jack the Ripper, he's also the guy who hired this Elseworlds version of Joe Chill to kill Bruce Wayne's parents. And I was like, really? That I did not see coming. I was extremely surprised by that. I mean, like, this is M. Night Shyamalan twist proportions we're talking here.
Yeah, the
In the
Joe
world of
Chill part
horror,
of it I didn't see coming. Cammy, I'll let you go though.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, in the world of horror, Shyamalan is not my favorite. So the
I
fact
will
that
agree
you
with
said
you.
that, I'm just like, no.
I apologize, but okay, would you rather have me said Hitchcockian?
No, because Hitchcock is brilliant and every film he's ever done is fantastic. Shyamalan does all of this really epic stuff and leads you to this horrible ending. And you're like, really? I sat there for this? And then you just get angry and you throw something at the TV or you leave the theater in angst. So that's at least my experience with Shyamalan.
He only got it right 2 times, though, Cammy. You got to admit that his twists in The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable are pretty darn awesome.
I'll give you The Sixth Sense. I won't give you Unbreakable though.
Really?
And yeah, and what was it? The Mist? Is that what?
Oh, I didn't see that one.
Oh God, I was just again epic up until the very last second, and I was like, oh my God, that's what I get out of this.
No, I saw The Sixth Sense, I saw Unbreakable, and I saw Signs. After Signs, I was pretty much done. But then I went to go see Split, and I really did enjoy Split. That was like the first Shyamalan movie I ever saw since Signs. And I loved Split because I'm also a big James McAvoy fan. But then I thought that Glass was like one of the worst movies I ever saw. And so I'm like, you're talking about an epic fail there. That was like the most epic of epic fails. And no, I have not seen The Last Airbender, and I never plan to.
So I will chime in on the twist. So like I said, I didn't see the Joe Chill connection coming in the comic version, right? For whatever reason, I clocked that it was his uncle instantly the second the character was introduced, before like the plot of the story had started. And I was just like, the timing of this, the reason for like, this is how this is being written. I don't know if what the hand tip was that made me think that. So I wasn't, so it's interesting. I then was more surprised by the movie, because having not been surprised by the twist in the book, as soon as the uncle character did not exist in the movie, I was like, all right, well, now it's someone else. Who is it going to be? And I was surprised, but I was also pained because I spent the entire movie thinking, I really don't want it to be Commissioner Gordon.
Oh, yeah.
I spent the whole time thinking about it, and I feel very conflicted of it. There are shades of what I said about Poison Ivy's usage, but it's completely different. But you'll get what I mean when I say this. It's that I understand why it was written that way. It was surprising. It did make sense in the context of this one-off alternate universe, but it still made me feel like it's one of those things. I was upset when Poison Ivy died because they accomplished what they wanted to do. They wanted me to be upset by it. I was upset when Gordon was revealed to be the killer because I was supposed to be upset about it, right? I found it very uncomfortable. I don't like Commissioner Gordon, the villain. I like Commissioner Gordon, the unassailable, like, bulwark of justice, who works, essentially within the lines, but understands Batman. The two of them have a great relationship. It was just a little painful for me, but I understood it. And since it was going to be a different story anyway, I don't really have a problem with it, I guess. But it certainly got a reaction out of me. I can say that much.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit further. So there was another interesting little surprise that is featured in this movie, and it's actually not something that is extremely uncommon in the animated films. The musical number. when they throw in a musical number, I get really interested and really curious. I mean, we're not going to do a Who Wore It Best of The Killing Joke because, as far as I'm concerned, I want to get that prologue story out of my mind for the rest of my life. Because, oh my God, that's so, oh God. But knowing that the Joker in the book really sort of does have some kind of a moment which could be a musical number, the fact that we actually got Mark Hamill singing in that movie is incredible, although it doesn't beat Rob Paulson as the two henchmen twins in Batman and Harley Quinn.
I figured that's where that was going to go.
That is going to always be one of my all-time because Rob Paulson is just like amazing, but I did not know. I mean, I knew that he could sing because I know that he's the voice of Yakko Warner in Animaniacs. But when he sings "Don't Pull Your Love Out on Me, Baby," I die every time because it is so beautiful. We have to understand that we got to celebrate Batman in so many different ways when we're talking about these types of things. But I don't know if that really was Jennifer Carpenter singing, but I thought the musical number was, I thought the tune was very catchy. And it didn't really feel out of place to me. And I was just absolutely shocked that they actually made some time for a song. I was really surprised by that.
I don't think it was out of place by any means because of the time period. You know, obviously stage shows were very much a thing and musicals were a thing until pretty much motion pictures. I am a huge fan of musicals, so I will never turn it down. I mean, one of my absolute favorite episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is the musical episode. But I think that you know, for me it just kind of threw me for a loop. I wasn't expecting her to break out in a song, so I was like, whoa, what's happening here, you know? So it was more just like a shocking moment, but I mean, I didn't hate it. It kind of surprised me a little bit.
You know what, it's a very dark film. I mean, I definitely say that the color palette definitely helped. I also kind of love the fact that when you also think about a lot of the animated projects, when it comes to Gotham City, you always remind yourself of the blood red sky. I kind of love the fact that in this movie, it's always like a very dirty brown. I really like that. Like, it definitely captures the time frame, very gritty, very dark, very dirty. And I also think that they did a great job with the look of Batman, better than they did it in the graphic novel. I think they added more dimensions to the costume, especially the mask. And ironically, when I was watching that the second time, I was reminded of another musical piece from Batman animation, just because the eye holes are bigger than normal. And I'm just looking at it and I'm just reminded of that Batman Beyond episode, a superstitious cowardly lot. And I'm just like, oh dear God, why am I thinking this? I'm sorry, guys. I'm clearly geeking out over Batman tonight.
No, I get it. By the way, I was just doing
refreshing, Steve. It really is.
I was doing a little bit of Googling there just because then you got me curious. So she did not do the singing performance. So the singing was provided by Grey Griffin.
I love Grey Griffin. She is a fantastic voice actress.
Who, fun fact, voiced Catwoman in the Arkham City video game. So she, not her first time voicing the character.
No, Grey Griffin has been a part of DC animation for quite some time, as a matter of fact. She's a name that I know very, very well. So that's good to know that she did the musical number, because she did do a great job. But I definitely agree. You know, I want to expand a little bit more. I really thought that the strongest part of this movie for me was definitely Catwoman. I mean, and she's not even Catwoman in this story. She's Selina Kyle. That's what I like about it. I mean, the only link, I love how they remind us that, you know, don't forget, you know, she's not donning the costume, but there are going to be some nods to remind her that she is Catwoman, because she talks about taking in and taking care of strays. And then towards the end of the movie, she actually does crack the whip. So I was really glad that we still got a little, I think that fan service right there to let you know, just remember, it is Selina Kyle, guys, but she is Catwoman.
Yeah, I thought that that was, I mean, obviously she's the most major like addition of Batman lore characters to the movie version compared to the comic, and I think it worked really well. I really loved getting to see Selena Kyle in this universe. I think with the difference, I mean, just to get a major thought out there, for all intents and purposes, the movie is a story kind of like loosely inspired by the comic. This is like really not a retelling of the comic.
No, it's not.
It's very surface level. So if anyone is, despite all the spoilers and all of the comparisons so far, if anyone's still watching this who hasn't read them, seen them, just it's like totally different experience. Um, but one of quality. But yeah, I would say so it's I say that as a lead in to say it's not really worth talking about differences because it's almost entirely differences other than a couple of surface level things. But of the quote unquote differences, I'm going to call them additions, embellishments, that kind of thing. I think Selena Kyle was the biggest one and also the most rewarding one,
Yeah.
because I think she added so much to the story, to this version of Batman, of Gotham, and given the nature of Jack the Ripper's targets and killings, I think that she lent a personal connection to the conflict that other characters couldn't feel. But there was a level, I mean, clearly, like she is drugged, she is attacked, she is targeted, like she has a skin in the game, as it were, in a way that the other players kind of don't. And I think that that makes for a really compelling watch.
So I actually was completely caught off guard by who Jack the Ripper ended up being. As a matter of fact, I actually thought that it was going to be Harvey Dent, just because
Yeah.
of the fact that we know Harvey Dent is Two-Face, and we were anticipating this to be his dark side. But as the movie kept progressing, I was watching Harvey and I was noticing this guy is really sloppy. Because
It's yeah, it wasn't
yeah.
that. It was different. Did you guys get any animated Long Halloween vibes out of the reveal of Gordon, like with his wife covering for him and all that?
Yeah,
Uh
you know what? I didn't think about that until right
Yeah, now that
now.
you
You're
say that.
absolutely right.
yeah, I was thinking about that a lot. And I think it was driven to the front of my mind because, like you, Steve, I spent a lot of the movie thinking, all right, well, if it's not going to be the same, murderer, it's my best guess is Harvey because of like all the baggage I have over who these characters are and what they must be. And then when he finds the room in Gordon's house, there's a vial of acid in there too. And like her face is a little burnt, right? And I'm just like, this has like Two-Face shit all over, like, just
Yeah,
all
I
over
mean,
how it was written. Did somebody
also,
change the script like really late in the
yeah.
game? Like, what
Yeah, I
is?
mean, like, did also anybody notice the very interesting thing? Did you notice that the Batcave is actually in the attic of Bruce
Yeah,
Wayne's house? I love that little twist there.
I thought that was great. I really, really enjoyed that. I thought that was cool. I don't remember if in the comic we ever see a Batcave.
No, we don't.
There's a loaded panel that shows a grandfather clock, which is
Yes.
what they then did in the movie. They had it behind the grandfather clock. But the idea of putting it in the attic was inspired, unique, and wholly devised by the movie. That was not, to
Yeah.
my knowledge, based at all in the comic. And I thought that was cool. That just worked
But
for me. I thought that was neat.
so when we discover that Jack the Ripper is actually Commissioner Gordon, I think that that exact scene, like, you don't want it to be Jim. You love Jim, even though he takes a pounding all the time and he's such a straight arrow guy. It's like, you don't want it to be the good guy. But then when you're in that basement room and then you see what Barbara says, like she says, he burned the sin out of me, you see all the little hints that drove him to this point. Here's a man that saw war. He fought in the Civil War. Here's a man who tried to drive evil out of the United States because he fought in the war. And he also was clearly someone who became a surgeon and took care of the troops. So he saw anguish, he saw horror, he saw pain, and he wants to rid Gotham City of evil. That's what he wants because he had faced it in war. So this could probably be a very interesting case or take on PTSD, which I would say is very interesting and different. And the fact that it's also done with a little bit of jealousy because he doesn't want the Batman to be Gotham's savior. He wants to be Gotham's savior. Mm-hmm. And even though people look at him as a murderer, a killer, a villain, he still believes he is doing the Lord's work. He's doing what's right. He is getting rid of the evil. And that is why we have a character like Batman go up against him and say, no, you are not the hero here. You are the villain.
You just kind of pinpointed what's inside a serial killer's head, though. The ones that target only women, they usually target women of the night. They target drug addicts and, the unclean of society, because in their mind, they're doing God's work. They are cleaning the streets of these, rather suspect women, if you will, that they feel don't deserve to live because of the choices that they've made. And far be it for me to say, I kind of saw it when he had that conversation in the backyard with Batman, which it was just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the actual reveal. But I mean, just the way he kind of pulled his coffee cup down and he's like, you didn't see his face, did you? And I'm like, oh no, it's you, you bastard. But why?
Oh, yeah, and the whole thing about him being left-handed, that was an interesting twist.
That was cool. Oh, and the fact that he didn't want to give over any of his records, and he didn't make it seem like he was actually doing detective work on this, So there was a lot of signs for me that it all pointed to Commissioner Gordon. But I think this is a comfortable place for me to say I highly thought that the movie well surpassed the graphic novel. It was, of the two, my favorite. I thought it definitely wore it better, but I think it just, for me, depicted the time period. I think that what the graphic novel or the comic of the time attempted to do was perfect for 1989, but I think that reading it in 2024, my standards are different. And then because I come in with all of this other knowledge from my experience with true crime and time travel and all of these things, there's just a lot of elements of the comic that just didn't set well for me, so it didn't make the experience as enjoyable as watching the film.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I mean, again, I think the book is perfect for its time. I mean, especially considering the fact that the big connection between the book and the film is the fact that Batman Gotham by Gaslight, the movie, is also the first attempt at DC Animation's take on Elseworlds. So it was only appropriate that they go with that one. But I also really like how the movie ends because you see Alfred and Batman and Selina with the three Robins. And I like that Dickie says, we can make something of this town. We can make something better. And that's where I would say, oh, I would love a sequel. But apparently there was a sequel and it wasn't that good.
Terrible. It was terrible.
And again, like the fact that I have no interest in this third installment. I mean, Cammie, like I said, if you get your hands on it and you read it and you tell me it's good, I will definitely take the opportunity to check it out. I think it's going to be 5 issues. I'm not exactly sure.
Anytime Batman and Superman team up in that kind of regard, I want to check it out because I do think there's potential for greatness. And I, unlike you, am not one to normally gravitate to a particular comic series because of the writer or the illustrator, unless, I mean, I have like a handful that I absolutely love and I'm like, yes, anything that they do I want to check out. I always go into things very open-minded, normally not knowing anything about them, and I think that makes it a fun surprise. So much of our world now is just so tailored of you go in perfectly prepared for things. It's nice to have a surprise every now and then. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna be picking up an Elseworlds title soon. There's gonna be a sequel to Dark Knights of Steel called All Winter. It's gonna be 6 issues, and I think what was really funny was I found out Tom Taylor did write the story, but it's actually being co-written by a name that I distinctly remember from the BookTube community. Jake Kristoff is writing it as well. So
the
I am
vampire guy.
and it's all and the story is all about Deathstroke. So
Okay.
I am really excited to see Deathstroke depicted in medieval times, and I'm really curious because they do say there's going to be a lot of other surprises. So I am really curious to see what other DC characters are going to be featured in the 6-issue miniseries. And I mean, other than that, there's going to be some other interesting Batman titles. They're going to feature Batman like as a barbarian, something like that. I don't know. But
every time I see Jay Kristoff in public, he always looks like the character that everybody forgot about from the Lost Boys, and he just like stepped out of the frame. He's so pale, and his hair is like perfectly coiffed. He's so pasty. He looks like a vampire. So the fact that he writes about vampires is just not surprising to me. But it'll be interesting to see him kind of move over to the world of comics and see what he's able to write. There's actually a lot of writers of recent in the horror genre that have dabbled in comics. Stephen Graham Jones, he actually did, well, it's still an ongoing series of a historical perspective on Columbus and flipping the switch. And that was really interesting. So it's interesting to see authors that you follow in a different realm run over to comics and see what they're capable of. It doesn't always translate, they're not always the same type of writer. There's some glitches, as I like to call them, but their imagination and that feel of the story still resonates, which is
well,
cool.
I'm just gonna say that if there's nobody that can transition from novel to graphic novel better than Neil Gaiman. He's the guy that knows how to do it right.
Neil Gaiman is a freaking god.
I loved his latest Miracle Man run. I'm looking forward to his new book that's coming out in June called The Anansi Boys. I'm really excited for some new work from Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman can do no wrong in my eyes. And if he wants to just speak to me for the rest of my life, he can be my alarm clock. He can be my GPS. He can be my timer. I mean, honestly, his voice is that of Alan Rickman for me. And I'm just like melting. He's just so dreamy.
Yeah.
Anyway,
okay.
So I got 3 thoughts just to pick up on some stuff that's been said. So the first of them, I'm going to forget. The second of them is, I had one thought about the movie that like maybe it's just me with like zero media literacy, but like I was left when the credits rolled thinking, so like he broke out of jail though, right? Like are we like what's the plan here? Like we had this big moment of like, oh yeah, the set piece at the fair and we fought and the like going up in flames and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, could we have made the film like 5 minutes longer just to like get like a little resolution to does Bruce clear his name? Like what's anyway, so again, maybe media literacy 0, maybe that was just caked into, well, like I guess they have proof that it was Gordon now like at the house and so he'll be cleared. But then my other point that I do want to say, and I've been sitting here thinking about it, there's a lot to talk about in the movie and we've been talking about it a lot. For the record, I think I have landed on I do lightly prefer the book, but I say that with the caveat that they are really, really so different.
I agree.
Movie is just a different story that was like inspired by the original. There are broad strokes, like not even structural, but aesthetic similarities between the two. Yes, it's a conflict between Batman and Jack the Ripper. Yes, you get to see this kind of like old world different take on it with a little bit of steampunk here and there, and like That's cool. That's in both places. I think for me, the thing that edges the comic over it just a little bit is that this is an incredibly digestible graphic novel. This
Yeah.
is barely longer than a single issue of a comic. It gets in, it does what it wants to do, and it leaves. It's all killer, no filler. I am gripped by every panel on every page. While it does do the kind of we're seeing Batman's origin again, it is about 2 pages. I don't feel like the book like crazy retreads ground or anything. That aside, it's one of those early Elseworlds, first Elseworlds titles where it's like, well, if we're going to be telling a different version of Batman, what are we doing here if we don't, take a stab at doing what we can, which is essentially what the movie does. But with a different ethos behind it, since it has a different kind of history of what Elseworlds is supposed to do. So all that being said, I really, really enjoyed my time with both of them to the extent it matters. I'm saying the book war at best, but this is one of those like big stamp of approval on both of them. I think
Yeah.
if this sounds like something that's worth your time, they're both worth your time. If you have any interest in one, doesn't really matter which, make sure you experience the other at some point. Steve, I think you said, I don't know if it's still the case, but at least for a long while, this was like your favorite of the animated
Oh
universe
yeah, yeah. For
movies.
the longest of times, Batman Under the Red Hood had been my favorite, and it's no surprise, it is a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
But Batman Gotham by Gaslight became my number one, and I think it was just because of the fact that, along with Bruce Greenwood coming back to voice Batman, just seeing Batman in a whole new way, and also the R rating, giving us the opportunity to see where we really can go with Batman in the world of animation. I just feel that because of the fact that it had the R rating, the crew had more space to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we got some really great imagery. We got some really great moments. I mean, the movie is very dark, but there are some very lighthearted moments as well. I
Yeah.
love the scene when Selina and Bruce are in the stagecoach and the cops are coming, and then they open the door, and I'm like, oh, you knew this is exactly what Bruce was going to do, but it's so perfect.
It still makes you laugh. Just because you see the punchline coming, it doesn't mean that it isn't a funny moment.
Oh no! I mean,
Yeah, it
just
was
look
great.
at just the animation on the policeman's
On the police officer's
and how
face.
he just closed the door and says, "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Wade." Like it's just perfect. Nothing else. It was just a great moment. It really was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think it's also important to point out, like I mentioned about Poison Ivy earlier, seeing Selena Kyle in this role and how she is also like a harlot of the night, and that is her profession in a lot of Gotham settings. And to see her actually own the role, though, that's a completely different thing. The
Yes.
power that she holds in this movie, just the way she carries herself. And I love how she makes it very well known and is very adamant throughout this entire film. She does not need Batman. She does not need Bruce Wayne. She does not need Commissioner Gordon. She doesn't need any man to protect her. She's got herself. And I think that speaks volumes to women, girls everywhere, that regardless of what your choice of profession is, regardless of the choices that you make in life, you can still be a badass chick and take care of yourself. And I love that about her character in
No,
this film.
she was the absolute linchpin of this film.
Yeah,
She really was.
definitely.
Definitely the star for me.
She was the one that really moved the plot along.
Yeah, yeah.
And regardless of what her profession was, she was classy, and
no,
I think
she was very
sometimes
distinguished.
and I think sometimes that gets lost in translation when people are talking about women in the sex industry, is that, they're just trashy. No, I mean, there's a lot of very classy, elegant women that choose that as a profession, and they carry themselves very distinguished, in the limelight, however they choose to portray themselves, whether it's on social media or television, movies, whatever the case may be, because there's, different levels of women that I'm talking about here. But I think this was a really good depiction of that and what a woman in the sex industry can be.
And I think that the best way that she depicts that is the scenes, that there's a few of them where she's changing. Like
yes, that is so powerful.
She basically says, I can be that dirty girl, but that's not me. I'm not a dirty girl. I'm a woman. And you know, all these people.
Well, she's owning her sexuality in those moments, you know.
I mean, it's like we're in a world where so many people are just getting on their soapboxes on social media, and they're talking about how they're sick and tired of the girl boss. They're sick and tired of the strong female character. Well, you know
I'm sorry. We've only been repressed for hundreds of years. Forgive us, you know. Forgive us for having a few minutes where we actually have a social platform to call our own and own our businesses and talk about shit we like.
But what I was getting at, Cammy, was if you write her well, it doesn't matter, because you'll just it
shouldn't matter either way, but we live in a society that the male ego will always dominate. You have very few men, like the two that I'm sitting in the room with, that will kind of set their ego aside and let a woman kind of take, you know, front stage and center. I've always been bold, brassy, in your face. That's just the kind of assertive female I am. But I know that also comes with the bitchy, brassy label, you know, and I'm full well prepared to take it on either way. I just want to ensure that any female that wants to take on that assertive persona, just come in with the best tool you've got, and that's your brain. If you come in with your wits about you, and you come in fully knowledgeable about whatever you want to sing canary about, no man on the planet can take your mind away from you. And as long as you're well versed in whatever you stand for and whatever you believe in, even if that's about who you are and what you stand for, and if you're selling yourself, then so be it, you know. But just go in with that level of confidence, and anybody who doesn't jive with it, they can go kick rocks. I don't care. I'm 42 years old. I could give two fucks what people think about me.
That's anymore. How Cammy will teach you two how to be that scary person in the comic shop.
Listen, if there's anything that I'm gonna,
my master class will follow.
See, if there's one thing that I'm going to be honest about, if there's one thing that I'm taking away from tonight, and I'm just going to remember when Cammy said, sometimes I just love to see a bitch die. Like, that was, I'm taking that line with me, Cammy. That was the line of the night. I'm sorry.
That is, in fact, the line of the
It really was great.
That's the horror scream queen in me. Sorry, sometimes those B-list horror flicks come out.
You said all the right words in all the right places tonight. I'm like, this was definitely one of the best discussions that we've had. We didn't rip each other apart tonight. We just had so many laughs. And I gotta be honest, you know, we had a very, very heavy conversation the last time Cammy and I were in the room together talking about Mouse. So even though this is by no means the same thing as Mouse, a dark story regardless, but a different kind of fantasy dark story. But I'm just glad that we had such a lighthearted conversation with so many great moments of smiles and laughs. It's great. I loved it. I think that's what we needed tonight, guys.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's gonna wrap it up, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely listen, read the comic. It's a quick and easy read. I think you will very much enjoy it. A very interesting take on Batman. The movie as well, especially if you're a Batman the Animated Series fan, you haven't really seen much beyond the television show. I mean, the truth of the matter is I'm pretty sure that is not the case, because if anyone has watched Batman the Animated Series, they checked everything else out by now. But Batman Gotham by Gaslight, I believe it's on HBO Max right now. You'll definitely be able to check it out. It's a good watch, guys. I highly recommend it as well. So once again, we're glad that you came tonight to watch us talk some more Batman. We're looking forward to the next discussion. We're hoping that Lindsay will be back. She unfortunately couldn't make it, but I know she read the book. So I'm definitely going to have to reach out to her and see if she read the book and saw the movie. We've got so much more Batman in store for the rest of the year, everybody. So until then, we will see you in the next one.